The desert sky bled orange and violet as if the horizon itself were aflame, and in that fragile hour between daylight and darkness, the land whispered of danger. A thin wind carried the scent of dust and ash, slipping through the rocks like a secret, curling into the hollow where a girl knelt, bound to a splintered post. Her wrists were raw, the skin cut open by coarse rope. Her lips were cracked, yet she pressed them together with stubborn dignity. Around her, coyotes prowled in a half-circle, their eyes glowing, their bodies lean with hunger. They waited for her to break, to scream, to stumble into fear. But Ayoka, though her breath came ragged, remained silent. Silence was her shield, silence the only weapon left. From the ridge above, a lone figure appeared, dark against the burning sky. His horse carried the weariness of long miles, yet its stride was sure, carrying him closer to the scene below. Samuel Hart had tracked stories of cruelty across this desert, but nothing had prepared him for this. A young woman, left as bait, humiliated and forgotten, made into a cruel game for scavengers. His chest tightened, anger rising sharp as steel. He raised his rifle, breath steady, and one crack split the evening stillness. The lead coyote fell in a spray of dust, the others scattering with startled cries. Her head jerked up, her gaze meeting his across the fading light. It was not gratitude he saw first. It was defiance. Samuel spurred his horse, sliding down the slope, the wind lashing his face. In a heartbeat he was beside her, knife flashing, cutting the ropes that had bitten too deep into her skin. She collapsed into his arms, trembling yet unbroken, her weight fragile against the rough fabric of his coat. "You're safe now," he muttered, though the words felt too thin for the fire burning inside him. She tilted her head, eyes dark with mistrust, but said nothing. Her silence was not weakness, it was survival. Samuel lifted her onto his saddle and swung up behind her, the night already heavy with the scent of predators still circling. As the horse surged forward, dust rising in clouds that stung their eyes, he leaned close, voice low as the desert wind. "You're sleeping with me now." It was not a command, not quite a promise. Something heavier, unspoken, lingering between them like a spark in dry grass. Her spine remained rigid, refusing to yield. But the bond had already begun, fragile and unchosen, carved by danger. They rode into the falling dusk, chased by shadows and whispers. Samuel could feel her resistance like iron, yet beneath it pulsed a strength that steadied even him. In that vast, merciless land, two lives were now tied together, their fates caught in threads neither could sever. The desert stretched endless ahead, but something in her silence promised that this journey would not only be about survival. It would be about trust, healing, and the fire that rises when two wounded hearts find themselves forced into the same rhythm. And as the horizon swallowed the last light of day, the story of Samuel and Ayoka began, not as a tale of rescue, but as the spark of a bond that could burn brighter than the desert sun. If this moment stirs something in your soul, if it leaves you leaning closer, longing to see where their path will lead, I invite you to walk with me further. A gentle like, a heartfelt comment, or a quiet subscribe is not just support, it is shared fire, a gift of energy that lets these healing stories breathe. So together we can keep unfolding tales that warm the spirit and soothe the weary heart. The night deepened around them, coyotes howling in the distance, and the desert prepared to test them again. Yet in that fragile silence between their breaths, the journey was already shifting, carrying them toward a dawn neither had yet dared to dream. The horse carried them into a quiet stretch of land where the wind hummed low, carrying with it the dry scent of mesquite and dust. Samuel's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for a place that could grant them a moment of rest. The girl, Ayoka, sat in front of him, her back straight, as if defiance alone held her upright. Her wrists trembled where the ropes had bitten deep, yet she never leaned on him for balance. He felt the heat of her body through the torn fabric of her dress, and though instinct urged him to steady her, he knew better than to force closeness she had not given. Trust was not born in a night, but perhaps it could begin here, in the fragile space between silence and survival. He found a cluster of mesquite trees gathered near a dry creek bed, their branches bending as if shielding the earth itself from the cruelty of the desert wind. Pulling the horse to a stop, Samuel swung down, boots sinking into the sand. He reached up to lift her gently, and though she resisted for an instant, her legs buckled as soon as they touched the ground. She caught herself with one hand, pressing the other against her side where the rope had cut deep. Without hesitation, Samuel crouched, drawing a small canteen from his belt. "Drink," he murmured, his tone rough but quiet. She hesitated, eyes guarded, yet at last she lifted the vessel and sipped. Only a small swallow before she pushed it back, her voice rasping low. "I take only what I must." The strength in those few words made something shift inside him. Most would have clung to the water greedily, but she chose restraint, as if survival itself had been pressed into her bones since birth. Samuel studied her face, burnt by the sun, streaked with dust, yet marked by a steady fire that refused to be broken. "What's your name?" he asked at last. The wind hissed through the branches, carrying a howl from far away, before her reply came. "Ayoka." Her voice held the quiet weight of stone, ancient and unyielding. He gave a small nod. "Samuel Hart. Most call me Sam." Her gaze lingered, testing the name as though it were a tool to measure him by. He busied himself with the saddlebag, pulling cloth to clean her wounds. When he reached for her wrists, she flinched back, suspicion sharp in her eyes. "I only want to keep them from scarring," he said softly, voice edged with something almost apologetic. At last she relented, extending her hands. The sight of the rope burns cut into him, angry lines, some bleeding, all cruel. He dabbed them gently with water, each touch careful, reverent even. She did not cry out, only tensed, the pain swallowed as if she had long ago learned that silence could shield her better than tears. "You've got grit," he whispered, more to himself than to her. She answered with a quiet truth that stilled even the night air. "Screaming feeds the wolves." Her words stayed with him, haunting, heavier than any rifle he had ever carried. The fire he built was small, but its warmth spread, soft and steady, painting her face in shifting light. She sat close, knees drawn to her chest, her arms wrapping around herself like armor. He watched her for a while, the flicker of flame catching in her eyes. She was no fragile thing, no helpless wanderer. She was steel-tempered by suffering, and beside her he felt a strange calm, as if her strength was reaching into him, healing something raw he had carried too long. The horse shifted nervously, ears flicking toward the dark beyond the firelight. Samuel's hand moved instinctively to the rifle lying across his knees. Shadows stirred in the brush, shapes weaving in silence, eyes faintly glowing. Coyotes again, persistent, patient, waiting for weakness. "Stay close to the fire," he said low. But Ayoka did not move. Her gaze held steady on the darkness, unflinching, as if she had always known the desert's cruel rhythm. The howls rose higher, circling, when suddenly a new sound split the night. Not the thin cry of scavengers, but a low growl, deep as thunder rolling from the earth itself. The coyotes scattered, but the growl remained, nearer now, heavy with promise of danger. Samuel froze, breath locked in his chest, the rifle raised. Across the firelight, two golden eyes gleamed, high, unblinking, predatory. The flames cracked, throwing sparks into the air as the shape emerged, a mountain lion, vast and muscled, each step soundless yet sure. Samuel's finger hovered on the trigger, every instinct screaming to fire. But Ayoka's voice slipped between them, calm and steady. "That is no coyote." Her eyes met the beast's glow, steady, fearless, as if she shared a language with it that Samuel could never touch. The lion paced, circling just beyond the light, its tail flicking with the rhythm of patience. Samuel kept his aim firm, sweat beading at his temple. Yet Ayoka rose, slow and deliberate, stepping forward with a grace that unsettled him more than the predator itself. "What are you doing?" he hissed, but she gave no reply. She crouched, scooping sand into her hands, letting it slip grain by grain back to the earth, her lips moving with words Samuel could not understand, not prayer, not song. Something older, like the desert itself, speaking through her. The lion paused, head tilting, muscles coiled. Samuel's heart pounded, finger tightening. But the beast leapt not forward, sideways, vanishing into shadow with one last growl that echoed like a riddle unanswered. Silence returned, heavy and fragile. Samuel lowered the rifle slowly, eyes fixed on her. She stood, trembling faintly, yet her face remained calm. "He chose another path tonight," she whispered. Samuel stared, unsure whether it was madness, miracle, or something more. He wanted to demand answers, but her exhaustion silenced him. She returned to the fire, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and sat with her gaze on the horizon where stars pressed close. Strength was not choice, she had told him earlier. It was what was left when choice was stolen. He understood now. She had not only endured the desert's teeth, she had learned to walk within its silence. Samuel leaned back, the rifle resting across his knees, and felt the weight of her words and her silence press against his own scars. The firelight softened, wrapping them both in a fragile warmth. For the first time in years, he felt something inside loosen, as if the desert night itself offered healing in her presence. The journey ahead loomed vast, danger certain. Yet the bond between them had shifted. It was no longer rescuer and rescued. It was something rawer, quieter, tied with threads neither of them had spoken, but both could feel. The embers cracked softly, sparks rising like brief stars, and the night held them in its breath. Samuel did not know what dawn would bring, only that he would not let her face it alone. The desert had given him a choice, and his heart had already made it. The fire dimmed, her breathing grew even, and still he kept watch, rifle ready, the warmth of her nearness steadying him against the shadows. The desert whispered again, and the story flowed on, carrying them toward dangers and truths yet unseen. The first light of dawn seeped across the horizon in pale strokes of silver and gold, washing the desert with a fragile glow that softened the cruel edges of stone and sand. Samuel stirred from half-sleep, the rifle still heavy across his lap. He blinked against the brightness and found Ayoka already awake, crouched near the creek bed. Her hands moved slowly, brushing away loose soil, tracing the ground with the sharp precision of one who could read the earth like a book. For a moment he simply watched her, her stillness strangely beautiful against the endless sweep of land. She was listening, though not with her ears. Her whole body seemed tuned to something in the silence. When she straightened, her expression was carved in steel. "They were here," she said, her voice low, steady. Samuel pushed himself up, heart tightening. "Who?" Her hand hovered over a boot print, half buried in the sand, edges sharp with freshness. "Men, not animals. They came in the night." He crouched beside her, running his calloused thumb across the imprint. The weight in the mark told him enough. 3, maybe 4 riders, boots heavy, not wanderers, but men with purpose. He felt his jaw clench. Raiders. The word tasted like ash. Ayoka nodded once, her eyes unreadable but certain. Samuel rose, dust falling from his trousers, the weight of inevitability pressing on his chest. "If they're trailing us, we can't linger. Pack what you can." She gave him a sharp look, one that cut deeper than words, but bent to gather the blanket all the same. She moved quickly, efficient despite the stiffness in her wrists. Watching her, Samuel felt a mix of admiration and unease. He hated the thought of her burdened by more miles, more danger, yet the steel in her movements told him she needed no soft cage of pity. She would fight, even if the fight was hopeless. By the time the sun crested fully, they were mounted again, the horses' hooves beating a steady rhythm that echoed Samuel's own pulse. The desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Hours passed, broken only by the dry whistle of wind. Ayoka sat behind him, silent, one hand gripping the back of his coat, her breath a steady rhythm against his shoulder. He found strange comfort in that closeness. The world could be falling to ruin around them, but her silence wrapped them like a fragile thread of healing, a reminder that not all bonds required words. Just past midday, Samuel's sharp eyes caught movement on a far ridge, the glint of sunlight on metal. His gut twisted. He pulled the reins sharply, guiding the horse down into a shallow ravine, its walls rising like a shield. "They've found us," he muttered. Though his voice was low enough, it felt meant more for himself. Ayoka leaned forward slightly, her lips close to his ear. "You should have let me walk. You're slower with me here." A bitter laugh escaped him, dry as the desert wind. "And leave you to them? Not a chance." She was silent for a moment, but when her voice came again, it was softer, almost fragile. "You don't know what chance you take keeping me." Samuel wanted to answer, but the crack of a rifle split the air before he could form the words. Dust leapt from the ground near his boot. Another shot rang out, closer, sharper, echoing off the canyon walls. His heart slammed hard against his ribs as he spurred the horse faster, twisting through the ravine. Bullets chased them, whining past like angry hornets. At last he pulled the horse to a stop in the narrow bend, sliding from the saddle and dragging Ayoka down with him. They pressed against the rocky wall, breath ragged, the air thick with dust and tension. Samuel checked the chamber of his rifle, jaw tight. "Stay low," he ordered. Ayoka crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the ridges with unnerving precision. Then her hand lifted, pointing. "There, 2 men behind those boulders." He followed her gesture and saw them, shadows shifting in the heat haze. His chest tightened. She had spotted them faster than he had. "Good eyes," he muttered, though his throat was dry. Her reply came quiet, but laced with truth that stung more than any bullet. "My people learned early. If you don't see first, you don't live." The words cut deeper than she knew, reminding him of battles past, of ghosts he carried like stones. He raised his rifle, searching for a clear shot. But before he could fire, a voice echoed down the ridge, mocking, cruel, heavy with recognition. "Cowboy, leave the girl and ride on. She ain't yours to keep." Samuel's grip on the rifle tightened. He shouted back, his voice edged with iron. "She's not yours either." Laughter followed, drifting sharp and merciless on the dry wind. "She's ours by right. You think you can change an Apache's fate with bullets?" Samuel felt Ayoka stiffen beside him, her hands curling into fists, though she did not speak. The words were not meant for him. They were knives aimed at her. Another shot cracked, stone shattering above their heads, dust raining down. Samuel pulled her closer against the wall, rage burning in his chest, but his mind racing with calculation. They were pinned, outnumbered, the horse trembling in the narrow space. Running meant death, but staying meant waiting for slaughter. Then her voice cut through his storm of thoughts, low but urgent. "There is another way." He turned sharply, searching her face. "What way?" She pointed down the ravine to where a narrow slit in the rock broke into shadow. "A path my people used. Soldiers never found it. They won't know it." Samuel stared at the dark cut, doubt gnawing at him. It looked barely wide enough for a man, let alone a horse. "Are you sure?" he pressed. Her gaze met his, sharp and steady. "Do you trust me?" The question hung heavier than gunfire. Samuel's throat tightened, the word lodging there like stone. Trust had never been his gift, not to men, not to women, not to anyone. But another shot cracked, closer still, the raider's laughter chasing down the wind. He looked into her eyes and found no fear there, only certainty. Against every instinct, he made his choice. Grabbing the reins, he whispered, "Stay close." Together they slipped into the slit of rock, shadows swallowing them whole. The canyon pressed tight around them, the walls damp and cool, the horse's hooves scraping sparks from the stone. Behind, laughter echoed from the ridge, cruel and certain. Yet the sound that froze Samuel's blood came not from behind, but ahead. Low, metallic, deliberate. The rattle of spurs against rock. His rifle lifted, every muscle coiled. At the passage's end, a silhouette waited, broad-shouldered, hat pulled low. The glint of steel at his boots confirmed what Samuel already knew. A voice rolled through the narrow chamber, slow, mocking, dripping with familiarity. "Well, well, thought I heard a rat in the cracks. Didn't reckon it'd be you, Hart." The past had just stepped out of the shadows, and Samuel felt the desert tighten its grip around them. What came next would test not only his rifle, but the fragile thread of trust he had just given to the girl at his side. The canyon walls closed in like the ribs of some great beast, shadows clinging to the jagged stone. Samuel held his rifle steady, but inside his pulse throbbed with the old ache of memory. The man before him was no stranger. Carver stepped forward from the gloom, his grin jagged, his eyes bright with malice. The years had hardened him into something darker, his voice carrying the drawl of a snake coiling closer. "Didn't think you'd crawl back through Apache land, Hart, and with company, no less." His gaze slid to Ayoka, lingering, sharp and invasive, as though she were prey he'd already claimed. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger. "Step aside." The demand came low, iron in the syllables. Carver chuckled, the sound grating against the stone walls. "You know I can't. Boys up top are eager. They'll be down soon enough." "But me, I like first pick." Ayoka's jaw clenched, her silence a blade sharper than steel. The air between them quivered with tension, the horse stamping nervously, its breath harsh in the narrow space. Samuel took a step forward, the rifle barrel steady, his voice rough. "One more word, and you bleed where you stand." But Carver only leaned his shoulder against the stone, tilting his hat back. "You don't scare me, Hart. You never did. You've been riding too long alone, pretending you're some savior. Truth is, you're just as broken as the rest of us." The words sliced deeper than Samuel wanted to admit. Ghosts stirred, long nights chasing bounties beside this man, nights that ended in blood and cruelty until Samuel had walked away. But the past wasn't done with him. It stood now in front of him, blocking the only path forward. Before either could fire, Ayoka's voice cut the air. Calm, sure, unwavering. "He won't shoot you. He wants you alive. He wants you afraid." Her words shifted the balance. For an instant, Carver's grin faltered, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Samuel seized the moment, shifting his aim and firing. The bullet struck stone inches from Carver's face, shards slicing his cheek, his hat spinning into the dust. Carver cursed, his smile twisting into a snarl. Samuel yanked Ayoka behind him, pulling her toward the horse. "Move!" They fled deeper into the narrow pass, Carver's furious voice echoing after them. "You can run, Hart, but you can't hide her forever." The words chased them, carried by the desert wind. Samuel's gut knotted. He knew Carver was not bluffing. The man was a predator who savored the hunt, who would bleed them slow if given the chance. The canyon spat them out into a wider gulch, the sunlight blinding after the dim shadows. Samuel reloaded with hands still trembling from the encounter, his mind heavy with the weight of old sins. Ayoka stood steady beside him, her dark eyes fixed on him, unwavering. "You knew him," she said simply. He nodded, voice grim. "Once, long ago." Her gaze did not waver. "And now?" The words hung sharp as stone. "Now he's worse than any beast we faced." Her expression softened only slightly, a whisper of empathy weaving through her strength. "Beasts hunt for hunger. Men like him hunt for shame." The truth in her tone hollowed something inside him. He turned sharply, scanning the horizon, trying to shake the sting of her words. He saw it then, smoke rising in the distance, dark against the sky. His chest tightened. He spurred the horse forward, urgency burning his veins. When they crested the last ridge, the sight below stopped his breath. Where his ranch had once stood, his fragile refuge carved out of years of loneliness, There was now only ruin. The cabin collapsed inward, charred beams jutting like broken ribs. The corral fence lay scattered, ash and footprints circling the yard. The mule, once a quiet companion, was gone. Samuel reined in, throat dry, rage simmering beneath his ribs. "They torched it," he muttered, voice low, brittle with grief. Ayoka slid from the saddle, crouching near the blackened earth. Her fingers traced the soot with deliberate calm, reading the signs as if the ground whispered to her. 4 men, maybe 5. They searched first, then left quickly. Samuel dismounted, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Searching for what? Her eyes lifted to meet his, sharp and unflinching. "For me." The words fell heavy, heavier than the smoke curling in the air. Samuel's fists balled, his boot kicking at a beam that sent sparks scattering. This place was all I had left. The crack in his voice betrayed him before he hardened again. Damn them! The ruins glowed faintly with ember light, painting Ayoka's face in bronze and ash. She stood slowly, her wrists still raw beneath the bandages he had tied, yet her voice was steady, warm with quiet strength. A home can be rebuilt, but you cannot if rage blinds you. Her calmness stung, then soothed. Samuel turned away, scanning the horizon, his body coiled with restlessness. The horse stamped nervously, its ears flicking. Ayoka bent, pressing her palm against the earth, eyes closed as if listening. "They are near," she whispered. Samuel crouched beside her, straining to hear. At first there was nothing. Then, faint and sure, the distant clatter of hooves drifted on the dry wind. His neck prickled. "They're circling back." Ayoka's eyes darted toward the canyon, where smoke drifted thick. "If we ride now, they'll see us against the sky." Samuel cursed under his breath. The desert gave no cover, only death in the open. He dragged her toward the collapsed barn, pulling her into the shadows of its blackened frame. The walls still stood, jagged and skeletal, yet enough to hide them for a time. Together they crouched low as hoofbeats grew louder, laughter riding the wind. From the ruins they watched 3 riders appear, silhouettes against the smoke. Carver led them, his figure unmistakable, his rifle resting easy across the saddle horn. He dismounted slow, surveying the wreckage with grim satisfaction. "Search the rubble," he ordered. His men obeyed, kicking through ash, laughing at broken remnants. Samuel's chest burned, each snapped chair and shattered cup another wound he could not mend. Beside him, Ayoka leaned close, her whisper brushing his ear like a healing balm. "Patience. Fire burns fast, but smoke hides longer. Wait." Her words wrapped around his fury, cooling it, steadying his breath. He held still, though every muscle screamed to rise to strike. Carver's gaze swept the yard, pausing near the barn, Samuel's chest locked tight. For a heartbeat, he thought they had been seen. Carver's hand brushed his revolver, his head tilting. Then he spat into the dirt and turned away. "Nothing here. He'll come to us. He's got nowhere else." The men mounted again, their hoofbeats fading slowly into the distance. Only when silence returned did Samuel exhale, every muscle trembling with restraint. He turned to Ayoka, whispering harshly, "They'll hunt us until one of us is dead. You know that, don't you?" Her gaze met his, unflinching, fire steady in her eyes. "Then you must decide. Are you running for yourself or for me? The question pierced him, sharper than any blade. He had no answer, only the burn of truth in her voice. And before he could find words, the crack of a branch split the air outside, too sharp, too close, not the wind. Samuel's rifle was in his hands in an instant, eyes darting to the tree line. Ayoka froze, her body taut, her dark eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the smouldering ruins. A figure emerged slowly, hands raised, palms open. "Easy, heart," came a voice rough with whiskey and miles. Recognition struck like lightning. Eli Turner, an old drifter, a man whose loyalty had always blown like sand in the wind. Samuel's jaw hardened. The past had not finished with him yet, and now another ghost stood in the ashes of his home. The desert had not loosened its grip. It was only beginning to tighten. The smell of charred wood lingered heavy in the air as Eli Turner stepped into the clearing, his palms raised in mock surrender, his weathered face marked by too many years of drifting and too little loyalty. Samuel kept his rifle trained on him, eyes narrowing. "Drop it, Eli, or I'll end this quick." The man chuckled, lowering his own rifle to the dirt with exaggerated care. "No need for thunder, Hart. Word is, Carver's boy's been sniffing after you. Figured I'd see if the stories were true?" His eyes flicked to Ayoka, lingering in a way that made Samuel's jaw clench. "Reckon they are." Ayoka said nothing, her silence sharp as flint, though Samuel could feel the tension rolling off her. She did not need to speak for him to know she distrusted Eli more than the fire that had devoured his ranch. Samuel's voice came hard. "If you're riding with Carver, walk away now." Eli spat into the ash, shaking his head. "Ain't riding with nobody. Not any more. Carver's gone meaner than a rattler. Got no taste for it. But you—" He let the word hang, turning his gaze toward the blackened beams. "Carver don't burn houses for scraps. He burns them for bounties." Samuel's chest tightened. He glanced at Ayoka, who still would not meet his eyes. Eli's grin widened faintly. "Didn't figure you for the type to play hero. Not after what happened in Abilene." The name cut like glass. Samuel's grip on the rifle tightened, memories pressing against him like shadows. But Ayoka's voice broke the air, calm yet sharp. "What happened in Abilene?" The question landed with weight, her dark eyes searching him. Samuel opened his mouth, but words failed. The fire behind them snapped and cracked in the silence he could not fill. Eli laughed low, shaking his head. "Past always catches up, Hart. Yours just came with a torch." His grin faded as he crouched, poking at a beam with the tip of his boot. "But I ain't here to trade ghosts. I came to warn you. Carver's riding south, blocking the path to Silver Rock. You head that way, you're done." Samuel's jaw set. "And why in hell should I believe you?" Eli's face hardened, the grin gone. "Because Carver's worse than you, and he don't just want her. He wants to break you. You kill me, fine, but then you'll walk blind into his trap." Ayoka stepped forward, her presence fierce despite the soot clinging to her skin. "Men who change sides are not to be trusted." Her words struck like arrows, steady and sure. Eli tilted his head, smirking. "Sharp tongue for one who don't speak much. You're right not to trust me, but you'll want to hear what I know." Samuel's mind twisted with the weight of choices. Trusting Eli was poison, but so was walking blind into Carver's net. His rifle wavered only slightly before lowering. "Talk, but one wrong move, and I'll put you in the ground myself." Eli nodded, spreading his hands. "Fair enough. Carver means to cut you off at the canyon fork, drive you east to where the land's dry and the water's gone, starve you out, break you slow. He's patient like that." The words coiled in Samuel's gut, sounding exactly like Carver. Cruelty measured, not rushed. "And what do you get out of this?" Samuel asked. Eli's grin returned, thin as paper. "Same thing I always get. Survival. Carver don't forgive debts. I owe him plenty. If I help you burn him down, maybe I walk free." Ayoka's gaze was sharp, unyielding. A man who fears another more than death will betray when fear returns. Her warning slid into Samuel's chest, heavy and certain. But options were thin as water in this land. Samuel holstered his rifle, though his hand lingered close. "We move west. Carver won't expect it. You ride with us, Eli. One false step, and I'll finish what I should have in Abilene." Eli gave a low whistle, retrieving his weapon from the dirt. "Fair deal, Hart. Fair deal." As the three mounted, Ayoka's hand brushed Samuel's arm, light as a breath, yet filled with unspoken warning. She did not trust Eli, and she did not want him to either. Samuel met her eyes, nodding once. They rode into the fading light. Three shadows stretched long across the ash-stained horizon. The silence between them was heavy, but Samuel could feel something shifting. Carver's pursuit was no longer just about one girl. It was about the truth she carried, and the fire it could ignite across the desert. Night crept in, the stars sharp above the ridges. They stopped at a cluster of rocks where Samuel struck a small fire against the dark. Eli sprawled against stone, hat low, his grin faint but watchful. Ayoka sat near the flames, the glow brushing her face in warmth. Her silence was not surrender, but strength, a healing presence that softened even Samuel's restless heart. He watched her for a long moment, realizing the weight of the path ahead. Carver would not quit. The desert would not spare them. Yet for the first time in years, Samuel felt that he was not walking into the storm alone. The flames flickered low, their light casting long shadows, and the night pressed close with the promise of more danger. Samuel leaned back, rifle across his knees, his eyes never leaving the darkness. The desert whispered again, carrying the scent of blood, smoke, and fate. The journey had only begun, and already it was shaping into a war between silence and truth, survival and love. Ayoka's presence beside him steadied his breath, a warmth against the cold air, a healing reminder that even in the heart of ruin, the spark of something greater could still survive. And as the stars shifted above, the desert made its vow. The storm ahead would test them all. Dawn rose pale and cold across the desert, the light seeping into the narrow wash where they had hidden through the night. The earth beneath them was damp with shadow, their blankets thin against the chill. Samuel woke first, his rifle never far, the rhythm of survival etched into his bones. Yet even as he scanned the ridges, his eyes drifted toward the girl sitting cross-legged near the thorn brush. Ayoka's face tilted to the morning sun, eyes closed, her stillness carrying a serenity that unsettled him. She looked carved from quiet strength, her silence more commanding than any shout. When her eyes opened, they were dark, unwavering. "You should leave me," The words landed sharp, without hesitation. Samuel turned, his chest tightening. "Not a chance." Her voice grew quieter, yet it cut deeper. "Carver hunts me, not you. With me gone, you live." Samuel shook his head, his jaw like stone. "Doesn't work that way. Men like Carver don't stop once they start. He'll hunt me whether you're here or not." From the shadows, Eli chuckled dryly, spitting into the dirt. "Girl's got a point, Hart. Hand her over, Carver gets what he wants, and maybe you keep breathing." Samuel's rifle was leveled at him in an instant, voice low, lethal. "Say that again, Turner, and you won't live to finish it." Eli raised both hands, a crooked smirk twitching across his face. "Easy. Just speak in truth." But Ayoka's gaze stayed fixed on Samuel, calm but heavy with fire. "He is right about one thing." "There is a bounty. My father gave me up, sold me when debt chained him tighter than rope." Her voice cracked, then steadied with iron. "But I am worth more than coin, not for who I am, but for what I carry." She reached into the fold of her dress, pulling free a small pouch of worn leather tied with sinew. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out. "This is the only thing my mother left me." Samuel frowned, his voice low. "What is it?" Ayoka opened the pouch, revealing folded papers, yellowed with age, but sharp with meaning. "Proof," she said. "Names of men who sold Apache land for gold. Records of soldiers who looked away. Carver works for them. That is why he hunts me." Her eyes flicked to the horizon, her voice steady, healing in its certainty. "Without this, my people live under lies. With it, they can fight." The weight of her words pressed into Samuel like stone. He thought of his ranch, now ashes on the wind, of the ghosts of Abilene, of every choice he had run from. He realized he was no longer a bystander in her war. He was tied to it, as surely as he had been tied to her in the saddle when he carried her from the coyotes. Eli gave a low whistle, shaking his head. "Well, no wonder Carver wants you. You're a walking gallows rope for half the territory." Ayoka's hand tightened on the pouch. "It is not for revenge. It is for truth." Her tone softened, almost like a balm, soothing even as it cut. Samuel met her gaze, feeling something shift deep within, warmer than fire, steadier than rage. "You should have told me," he murmured. Her reply came sharp as flint. "Would you have stayed, or walked away like every other man?" The words pierced him. He remembered too well the lives he hadn't saved, the times he had walked from battles that weren't his. But now, staring at her, he knew there was no leaving. "I'm here," he said quietly. "And I'll see this through." The firelight caught her eyes, softening them, and for the first time she seemed to believe him. The silence that followed was not heavy but warm, carrying a thread of healing that eased the edges of their fear. Samuel felt it, the fragile beginnings of trust woven between them. Eli broke it with a bitter laugh. "You're both mad, dragging a pouch of names across the desert, thinking you can topple men who own judges and lawmen. You ain't just signing your deaths, you're signing mine too." Samuel's gaze hardened. "Nobody asked you to stay." For once, Eli's grin faltered. He spat into the dirt, muttering curses, but fell silent. Ayoka lifted her chin, her voice clear. "Then let it burn. Better flames than silence." The conviction in her tone washed through Samuel like fire and water both. Healing the doubt, igniting something steadier than anger. He stared at her, realizing she was not simply a girl he had saved, but a woman carrying the weight of her people, a woman strong enough to face the desert's cruelty and still stand unbroken. The wind shifted, carrying the distant echo of hoofbeats. Ayoka's head tilted slightly, listening. They are closer. Samuel's body tensed, his hand gripping the rifle. "Then we move now," he said, his voice calm, steady with the strength her presence lent him. The horse stamped nervously. Eli grumbled, but there was no time for hesitation. They mounted quickly, the pouch clutched in Ayoka's hand, the desert stretching wide ahead of them. As the sun rose higher, burning white against the horizon, Samuel felt the path sharpening into something inevitable. Carver was not the true fire. They carried it now, in truth and in bond, in the fragile healing that was beginning to bind two wounded souls together. Dust rose in their wake, the land vast and merciless, yet for the first time Samuel's heart beat with something more than survival. It beat with purpose, with trust, with the fragile warmth of a love not yet spoken but already alive. And as the hoofbeats behind grew nearer, he knew the desert was no longer only a place of loss. It had become the crucible where something unbreakable was being forged. The desert sun climbed mercilessly, painting the land in blinding white. Dust clung to their skin, to the horses' flanks, to the sweat that trickled down Samuel's temple. Hours of hard riding had carved silence into them, broken only by the steady thud of hooves. But the silence was not empty. It carried the weight of pursuit, the closeness of danger, and the steady warmth of Ayoka's presence behind him. Her fingers clutched the pouch tight, her other hand gripping the saddle horn, and though her body swayed with exhaustion, her spirit never faltered. Samuel could feel it in her nearness, the fire that refused to yield. By midday, the distant haze of riders grew sharper. Carver's men had not slowed, relentless shadows sweeping across the horizon. Samuel's gut tightened. They could not outrun them any longer. He pulled the horse into a shallow arroyo, its walls high enough to shield them from sight. Dismounting, he tied the reins to a low branch, his voice rough but steady. "We can't ride them off. We make our stand here." Eli spat into the dust, his face pale beneath the grime. "You're out of your damn mind. 6, maybe more, coming fast. And you want to plant our boots here like it's holy ground? It's suicide." Samuel's gaze cut to him, hard as flint. "Then ride on. But if you stay, you fight." The warning in his tone left no room for argument. Eli cursed, fumbling with his pistols, muttering about fools and graves. Ayoka slipped down from the saddle, her steps light despite her raw wrists and the fatigue in her frame. She moved to Samuel's side, her voice calm, healing even in the shadow of what loomed. "If they want me, let them come. I will not be bound again." Samuel studied her face, marked by ash, dirt, and exhaustion, but unbroken. In her eyes he saw not fear but defiance, and it steadied him more than any rifle. They worked quickly, dragging brush and stone to form a crude barricade at the mouth of the arroyo. Samuel crouched behind it, rifle ready, every sense alive with the weight of the moment. Eli tucked himself behind a boulder, pistols loose in his hands, his grin nowhere to be found. Ayoka knelt beside Samuel, her breathing steady, her presence like a balm against the fever of his blood. "They are close," she whispered, her eyes tilted toward the ridge. 6 riders, one heavier than the rest. Samuel's stomach clenched. Carver. The thunder of hooves broke the stillness, shaking the earth. Dust rose in a storm as 6 riders descended, Carver at their lead, his long coat snapping behind him. He reined in just beyond rifle range, his grin cruel beneath the brim of his hat. "Halt!" he called, his voice rolling across the canyon like thunder. "Knew you couldn't run forever." Samuel's rifle was steady, aimed at Carver's chest. "You should have left it at Ashes." Carver's laugh was sharp, jagged. "And miss the fun? No, no. You've got something I want. Hand her over. Maybe I let you crawl out alive." Ayoka rose from behind the barricade, standing tall beside Samuel. The sight of her made Carver's grin widen. "There she is, little bird with fire in her hands. Come now, girl. Don't bleed for a man who don't know your worth." Her voice rang out, steady as stone. "I know my worth. It is more than the coin of traitors." Her words rippled across the men like a spark in dry grass. Carver's eyes narrowed, his smirk faltering. "She's got your tongue, Hart. Careful she don't hang you with it." He raised his hand, signaling his men. "Take them alive." The riders surged forward. Samuel fired first, the crack of his rifle splitting the air. One rider tumbled from his saddle, his body thudding into the dust. Eli's pistols barked in quick succession, scattering another. The rest pressed on, bullets sparking against stone, the air thick with smoke and screams. Samuel pulled Ayoka down behind the barricade, her breath fast but her eyes unbroken. Carver dismounted, striding forward like a storm, revolver blazing. The fight tore through the arroyo, gunfire, dust, the thunder of hooves. Samuel reloaded with hands steady despite the chaos, his focus narrowing on Carver's shadow moving closer. Eli shouted curses, firing wildly, desperation in every shot. But then, above the gunfire, Ayoka rose, clutching the pouch high. Her voice cut through the storm. "This is what you want." Everything stilled. Even Carver froze, his grin curdling into rage as his eyes locked on the pouch. Ayoka's gaze burned. "You burned homes, starved families, sold land that was not yours. This is the proof. This is your fear." For a heartbeat, doubt flickered in the faces of his men. The kind of doubt that cracks loyalty. Carver snarled, his revolver steady. "You think paper will save you. You don't know the fire you're playing with, girl." Yet his men shifted, their eyes darting between him and the pouch, unease breaking through their bravado. Then a sudden shot rang out, not Samuel's, not Eli's. One of Carver's own men fired, striking another. The canyon erupted into chaos. Loyalty shattered, men turned on each other, old grudges exploding in gunfire. Horses reared, screaming. Dust and smoke swallowed the air. Samuel seized the moment, rising from cover and firing into the fray. Another rider fell. Eli, wide-eyed, emptied his pistols with frantic energy, shouting into the storm. Through it all, Carver moved like stone, unshaken, his revolver spitting fire. He cut down one of his own men without hesitation, rage burning through him. His voice boomed over the chaos. "You think truth can break me? I own the law. I own the land." Ayoka's reply was fierce, healing and sharp all at once. "Lies own you, Carver. Truth will burn you." The words struck him, his eyes blazing as he raised his revolver toward her. Samuel fired, the bullet grazing Carver's shoulder, spinning him back. He staggered, but did not fall, his eyes burning hotter. Their gazes locked across the smoke. Samuel's chest heaved, his jaw set. "You'll find out soon enough," he growled. The fight pressed on, men scattering, loyalty crumbling. One rider fled, spurring his horse hard into the distance. Another cursed and followed. Carver roared in fury, firing into the sky, his authority cracking with every shot. His men faltered, their faith gone. Samuel stepped forward from the barricade, rifle steady, the ache in his arms forgotten. For the first time, Carver's grin faltered. Blood seeped through his coat, his power slipping away like sand. "This ain't finished, Hart," he spat. "I'll drag you both to hell before I quit." But even his own voice carried the tremor of defeat. When he mounted and rode off, bleeding into the horizon, the arroyo fell silent, except for the ragged breaths of those left standing. Eli slumped against a rock, shaking, whispering curses. Samuel dropped to one knee beside Ayoka, his voice rough but tender. "You hurt?" She shook her head, her chest rising fast. "Not hurt. But this ends only when Carver ends." Her words carried the truth Samuel already knew. Victory was not yet theirs. What they had gained was survival, and the fragile warmth of a bond tested by fire. As he looked into her eyes, fierce yet healing, Samuel realized that whatever storms still waited, they would face them together. The desert was not done with them, and neither was fate. The night would come again, and with it, choices that could not be undone. The canyon lay quiet after the storm of gunfire, the silence broken only by the crackle of dying torches and the restless shuffle of the horse. Carver's body was just another shadow in the dust now, his grin gone, his menace ended, but the weight of his presence lingered heavy as smoke after a blaze. Samuel lowered his rifle slowly, his arm trembling where the bullet had grazed him, the ache dulled by adrenaline and something fiercer, relief. Eli slumped against the rock, his pistols empty, his usual smirk stripped away. He looked not like a drifter playing at survival, but like a man worn thin by fear, regret carving lines across his face. Ayoka stood at the heart of it all, her dress torn, her skin streaked with dust, her hair tangled by wind and battle, yet she was unbowed. The pouch glimmered faintly in the torchlight, not with jewels or gold, but with the raw, unshakable weight of truth. She held it close, her spine straight, her gaze steady. Samuel walked to her side, his voice low, softer than the desert wind. "It's over." She turned to him, eyes dark but burning. For him, yes, but not for what he served. Her words struck deep, more piercing than any blade. Samuel knew she was right. Carver had been a monster, but he was only the fist of larger men, ranchers, soldiers, men with ink-stained hands who grew fat on silence. Killing him hadn't ended the fight. It had only torn away the mask. Eli coughed, his laugh weak, bitter. "You two talk like prophets. Truth don't change nothing out here. Men will keep taking. Carver's gone, sure, but another'll come." Ayoka's gaze cut to him, fierce yet calm. "Another will come, but so will another stand. That is the way of fire. It spreads." Samuel studied her in the flickering glow. She had faced wolves, lions, raiders, and the man who had burned his life to ash, and yet she still stood unbroken. In her presence, he felt not just anger or grief, but something healing, something that stitched closed the wounds he had carried for years. She had become more than the girl he had saved. She was the reason he could begin again. Together, they buried Carver in the canyon. No stone, no song, just dust. Men like him did not deserve to be remembered. The desert swallowed him as it had swallowed countless others. When the first light bled across the sky, they rode on, the land stretching wide and merciless beneath the dawn. Samuel's grip on the reins was tight, but his heart beat with a new weight, not of exile, but of purpose. Aryoka rode close, the pouch never leaving her hands. Silver Rock rose from the desert like a scar, its streets restless with whispers of lore and betrayal. Faces turned as they entered. Samuel Hart, the cowboy thought long cursed by his past, and the Apache girl once left to die beneath the eyes of scavengers. Whispers rippled, fear, doubt, hope. They dismounted at the courthouse steps, the doors looming heavy with the stain of corrupted law. Aryoka lifted the pouch high, her voice carrying clear as the desert wind. These are the names of men who sold land that was not theirs, who burned homes, starved families, lied while they filled their pockets with gold. This is their truth, and now it is yours. The crowd stirred, silence shattering into fire. Anger rippled through them like dry grass set alight, their voices rising against the weight of silence that had crushed them for too long. Samuel stood beside her, rifle slung across his back, his chest swelling with pride. She was no longer just a girl bound to a post. She was the flame itself, burning away shadows. Eli muttered, shaking his head, "God help us all." But Samuel only watched Aryoka, warmth filling the hollow places inside him. In her defiance, in her healing fire, he had found more than survival. He had found the start of love, fragile but fierce, strong enough to carve a path even through a land of ashes. Their story was not finished. It had only just begun. The desert would test them again, and the men behind Carver's shadow would rise, but Samuel knew now that together they could endure, not because they had been spared, but because they had chosen to stand. Love was not a gentle thing in this land. It was a fire that healed even as it burned, a promise stronger than silence. And so, under the wide sky, Samuel and Aryoka stepped into the unknown, carrying truth, carrying fire, carrying each other. If this journey touched your heart, if it stirred something quiet and healing in you, I invite you to share that spark. Leave a comment, subscribe, and lend your light. Every word, every gesture of support keeps these stories alive, so that together we may keep walking through the desert of silence and into the dawn of truth.